Welcome back to this week's episode of Between the Lanes. I'm so excited that you've joined us, and we have a special guest today. Between the Lanes, it's a father-daughter Between the Lanes.
Yes.
Lindsay Huckins is my youngest daughter, and the mother of 5 of our 15 grandchildren. And your kids, they range from 9 to 13 with a set of triplets in between.
Yep.
And
I'm efficient.
you are very efficient and very busy.
Yes. Very busy.
So we've done this before. We've sort of had some rapid fire questions, and I thought maybe this would be an opportunity for us to do a little rapid fire Q&A today.
Yes.
So,
Well, this kind of spurred, I'll give a little context, because this kind of spurred from, we went on a road trip together, you and I. You were gracious we ended up getting a 12-passenger van for all of our kids, and I had to go pick it up in Omaha, which is where my dad's mom's lives currently and my dad's sisters. And so he was already there, so he ended up driving home with me. And on the way home, I kind of just naturally rapid fire questioned you.
yes.
And I've never seen anybody live their life more intentionally than you do. I can just say, one of my, I guess, the things I like to brag about you is that you are the same. In any environment that anybody meets you, you are the same. You will be the same way. So people that are like, I love your dad so much, I'm like, he's the same person at home that you see out wherever you are. But it's because you are so intentional about how you live your life. And that was very clear to me when I asked you these questions. I mean, I didn't stump you once. You always had something to say. You always had an answer. You didn't have to think about it.
So we're going to play Stump the Dad today.
Well, we'll try. I don't know.
Okay, all right.
I think one of the biggest things to me is, you had and have an amazing family. Clearly I know them.
Yes.
I didn't know your dad super well because he passed away when I was 5. Mm-hmm. But from the stories you tell me, he was an amazing dad. But you're different than him. You're a different dad than he was. So what do you think, why do you think that is? What do you think you learned from him? And what do you think you adapted, and how did you do that? Because most people, you just are kind of the product of your environment and how you were raised. But for you to be different, what do you think that was?
Yeah. So if I think back, my dad's dad, so my paternal grandfather, he sort of set the tone for what I know and understand about family. He had three children, 2 boys and a girl. My dad was the oldest of the boys. And what I saw from my grandfather, we lived in Omaha, Nebraska. He lived in Houston, Texas. But whenever we were around him, I saw him engaged with his kids as adults, engaged with his kids, supportive of them, loving what they were involved in, proud of them. And so I took that image, and it impacted my dad. He was a strong personality. He was a leader. He impacted us. He created an environment in our family where we really desired to please our dad, out of our love for him. It wasn't necessarily about performance, but we loved him and wanted to make him proud of us. Mm-hmm. And so then I tried to replicate that in my family. Mm-hmm. There were things about my dad. Of course, all of us have a certain level of brokenness. And there were certain things about my dad that impacted me in a way growing up. That my dad was a dominant person. He had a type A personality. And he was not adverse to threatening somebody. Not, his big threat was, you're going to hear from my rottenest, sleaziest, most attorney, if you don't change what, blah, blah, blah. And his sort of bombastic way created in me a response that I don't think I want to be like that. I don't want to be that, make that kind of response. So it affected me. And yet, on the other side of my dad, he was so affectionate. I can't think, even as an adult with children, young children, when we'd go visit my dad, I never left his home without a hug, most of the time without a kiss on the neck, without a whisper in my ear, I love you, and I'm proud of you. Things like that were so impactful to me. I wanted to carry him into my family and to the best of my ability, even today. Because as an adult, it meant so much to me. So now, married for 15 years plus mother of 5, I still love to give you a hug and tell you how proud I am of you. And I do that with all the kids.
Yeah, you are really good at that. One of the things that you from when I can remember, you've always been about values and influence. Those are kind of your two, I think, your kind of life mantras. And I think that, you've said every family has values, whether they've acknowledged them or not. And I would say your family was like that. You had values, but nothing that was ever written out or kind of, revisited often like you did with us. What caused you to see the need to have them written down, to make it a priority, to talk about them often, make sure that we're all aligned, we're all on the same page? Where did you get that from someone, or did the Lord kind of download that to you?
No, I got it from someone. So it started when I got saved at 16. But I started thinking then, part of what being a Christ follower is living your life to be as influential as you possibly can, to impact people's lives, to live in such a way that people look at you and they say, there's something about him or them that is different. And I want to be like that. I want to find out what they're like. So creating that is all about influence. I'm gonna live in such a way. I could stand on the street corner and preach, but I'm not going to get very far. I think more is caught than is ever taught. And so I'm even today, I'm amazed when people will say to me they've been observing me, and I've had no idea. But God has the ability to shine a light on you so that you can be a light to somebody else without ever realizing it or knowing it. And so it started when I got saved with that concept. I want to live my life to be an influence. Well, then as children came, I thought, I want my kids to be an influence too. And I grew up with this sort of mindset. My parents they always would reflect things sort of like we're lanes, and lanes don't do that. And if my excuse was, well, Johnny and his family do, their response would be, we're not Johnny and his family. We're the lanes, and the lanes don't do that. And so growing up, you might have heard that parroted back as well. But in a concept of as a Christ follower and saying, I'm now a part of the family of God, and I want my life to reflect my association or involvement with Him, and so I'm going to live in a certain way, and that means or doesn't mean that I can compare myself to somebody else and say, well, at least I'm not like them. Mm-hmm. Because growing up, my parents' response to that was, we're not them. Mm-hmm. We're this. So I think that's the way God wants us to live our life, to be an influence. That's what I tried to do for my life. And then I realized this. Every generation has a natural disconnect with the generation behind them. So fathers, there's a natural disconnect with their sons and daughters just because it's a different generation. Growing up, my dad, for instance, he loved the big band, big band era. And I grew up in the Beatle era. And so when I would listen to rock and roll Beatle music as it was, launching into much more of the, different genres today, but he would say, Tom, come here. Let me play some really good music. And then he would want to put on, Benny Goodman and his orchestra. It's like, no, Dad, no. And I realized that's just an example of how easy it is for one generation not to understand another generation, and for there to be a disconnect. And so I began thinking, as you kids were getting older, I want to establish a way to connect values that are different than
multi-generational.
Right. So it could be multi-generational in its impact. So when I look at you and say the equivalent of when my dad was saying to me, hey, Tom, that's jungle music. Why don't you come here and listen to this? If it wouldn't have played for me and my generation, but it does play for you and your generation, I just want to know, do we still have the same values?
Right.
Have I imparted the value? That was my goal.
So what did that look like when you were in high school? How did you, even though I know you hadn't written them out yet and everything, but when you made the switch and you got saved and you were like, okay, I'm going to live my life to be the greatest influence for God and his kingdom, how did that play out in high school? How did that look when you're still going through your teenage years and,
I was learning how, in high school, how to apply that. I knew I was responsible to live a life that other people would follow. And that meant that I had to say no to certain influences of my friends. I remember my closest friends in high school, they were out one Friday night, and it was the fall of the year. There were 5 of them, and my buddy had a 57 Chevy, 4-speed, it was really, really cool. And had glass packs, so you hear as it's coming down the street. And they come on a neighborhood, a street neighborhood, and there's a party in this house, adult, there's adult. And they go, hey guys, let's do this. And so they faked beating one of my friends in front of the house that was having the party. And they come rumbling down the street. They stop in front of the house. They'd let my friend out earlier, down the street a little bit. So he's walking, and when he gets right in front of the house, these guys stop the car, jump out of the car. They chase him down. There's sort of a grassy area right across from this house. Oh, and one of the guys had gone to the trunk, pulled out a tire iron. And
oh my gosh.
So they chase this guy, pin him down, and they're beating the ground, and pretty soon they got all these people in the party doing this out the window.
Was that the goal? They just wanted the attention?
Yeah, they just, it was a prank,
boys.
a funny prank. So they leave the guy. As soon as they notice people are watching them, they all run back, get in the car, and they're off down the street. And then slowly, my other buddy that was the fake beat up, he slowly gets up, staggers down the street, and gets in the car. And they're all, It just so happened that night, I was with your mom, who was my girlfriend at the time, and I wasn't with them. If I would have been with them, I probably would have said, guys, no, we can't do this.
Yeah.
No, this isn't going to be funny. No, this is going to. but I wasn't with him.
Yeah.
And I wasn't with him, not just because I was with my girlfriend, but because they did something knowing that I wouldn't have approved. And let's just do it in a moment. And so I did things like that early on to say, there's certain values that I can't let you influence me. I have to live by my own values, because if not, I won't be the influence that I won't represent my family, number one, and I won't be the influence that I know God wants me to be.
I was just telling somebody the other day that I think number two to how often I pray for my kid's spouse, I pray for their friends, because I actually think at any age of your life, your friends probably have the greatest impact, because we know people who their friends have, kind of influenced them into getting divorced, kind of rallied like, you deserve better, you should be treated better, or, for business opportunities for the wrong reasons, or whatever it is, that even as adults, you see them kind of influence. And I think one of the hardest things is being able to decipher when a voice has kind of changed in your life. Like maybe they started out in a season of your life and y'all were kind of raising kids together or whatever, and seasons change and bring about different friend circles. How have you navigated that? Figuring out like the different seasons of your life and when it's time to say, hey, you were a good influence in my life for this season, but actually for this next season, I don't feel like you are anymore. How do you navigate that well?
Yeah, so you'll remember growing up, one of my sort of mantras was whenever you were leaving the house to go be with your friends, I would say, remember, you're an influence or you're being influenced. You be the influence. And I think that applies at every stage of life. And so when you were little and you weren't able to make those decisions, but I was hopefully working to train you in those decisions, we would judge if when you played with a certain person and came home, if you had an attitude, if you talked back, if you rolled your eyes, and we began to notice there's certain people that you hang out with that are not a good influence on you. So no, you can't go play with him. No, they're not going to, you're not going to go to their house and spend the night. Maybe you can have them over to our house and we'll see if in fact we can influence them, but if not, you're not going to play with them at all. And part of the parenting process is when you're up until the time you're maybe 12, 13, I'm making a lot of these decisions for you, but I'm slowly giving control of those decisions over to you so that when you get greater freedom, usually that is around driving, you have some foundation for the decisions that you need to make. And so that
I have to say one thing that you and Mom did that it wasn't until Mom was teaching a parenting class that I was like, oh, that was so intentional, is you always made it about our influence. So instead of being like, no, you can't hang out with that kid because they're a bad kid, or whatever, you would say, when you come home from hanging out with that kid, I see a change in you. You're more sarcastic, you're disrespectful, you roll your eyes. And until I can see that you can influence them, you can't spend as much time with them or whatever. Because I think that actually is more training in leadership versus like, I'm just going to remove you from the situation because that's a bad kid.
Yes.
You actually did one step further in the training process to say, no, I'm actually going to train you that you need to be the leader and this is how. And when I see this, then you can have, those kind of things.
Yeah, it's part of maturing. I want to know that you have the ability to be in this situation and not compromise or not be influenced, but to actually be the influence, like I was talking about with my friends there. Well, if you grow up with that mentality, so you're you're realizing, okay, I need to live my life. I want to live my life to be an influence, and I realize that there are certain people, certain situations, or things that will impact me, even as an adult. Then, as an adult, what I begin to realize is, oh, when I'm around them, I become more negative. I become more, I, my spouse, I disrespect my spouse, or we come away from times with them with greater conflict. I'm not suggesting they're the problem. I'm suggesting I can't be the influence I want to be in that environment, so I'm going to limit it. And I don't have to tell them why, I just say, yeah, we can't get together, or, we're busy, because I'm trying to manage something in my own life that is a part of it. And I agree. So part of the selection of friends, you learn even as you're parenting your kids, you need to pick friends that have similar values to be your closest friends, because if not, their values, if there's somebody that has come from a tough situation and they're needing a family, they need stability in their life, and you can provide an influence for them, we're all for it. Go incorporate them into our family. But if they try and draw you, and as a part of drawing you, they begin to impact then we're not for that, and we'll resist it or change it, and we're going to live it ourselves.
Right.
So
yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that you've always done, is even in watching you as a leader, I feel like you're the type of leader that you don't ask your people to do something that you yourself are not willing to do. You don't hold up a different standard for the people that work with you than you hold yourself to. It's like, no, I'm going to do the same thing that I'm asking you guys to do as well. It's not going to be different.
That's a tricky place, in that as a leader, your responsibilities change. So I may not be doing the same thing as you, but it's not because I'm better than you. I've earned a right not to do. It's like, no, my role, my responsibility has changed, but I'm willing to do it, and I appreciate you for doing it. And, those are all attitudes that are really important, not only as a leader, but as a parent.
Yeah. Do you think that I will say, I feel like there's such a direct correlation between parenting and leadership. And I know that people can be great leaders and not ever be a parent. So it's not like you have to have both. But I feel like there's such a correlation. Do you feel like there's anything that you feel like stands out that's different between being a leader and being a parent? Or do you feel like they're pretty connected?
I think the basic concepts of leadership are rounded out, shaped and fulfilled as a part of parenting. I think another way I would say it, I agree with your statement. You don't have to be a parent to be a good leader, but the kind of leader you are was impacted by the parents you had. And they prepared and trained you. And if you are a parent, part of the parenting that is part of the leadership that you're reflecting has been learned. It's applied from what you learned in your home. So if you can correct with kindness, but with firmness, if you can if you can lead in difficult situations and explain, motivate to accomplish something that is really important, if you can provide guidance and use that guidance to shape them and move them in a certain direction in your home, in your children, if you earn the right, their respect, you can do that in the marketplace in any position of leadership.
So would you say that, like, maybe someone who would say, well, great, I had a terrible home life, so does that mean I'm just destined to be a terrible leader? Would you say that's probably why there's so much value in, like, mentorship and things like that? Because you're getting that connected piece of somebody, maybe what you didn't have in your parents, to come alongside you and almost like in real time develop you,
Yes.
which is what a parent should be doing, but maybe your parent didn't. So then you get a mentor that does that.
Yeah. So I would say at whatever level that you begin to realize I was deficient. My family life. What's always amazed me is whatever situation we're raised in, we tend to think everybody is raised in.
Right.
And when you realize, oh, man, my family was broken. My family is, I didn't have this, and I'm deficient in this. Well, then go get the instruction or shore up the area of your deficiency. In a one-on-one coaching or mentoring, great. But if you go, well, I don't know anybody, I don't know where I'd find it. There's all kinds of resources on the internet, in bookstores. Don't use the excuse, I just don't know how I would do it. I have great compassion if your family was broken and they had an impact on you. If there was dysfunction in it, anger, addictive personalities, things that happened in your family, and you go, wow, I don't even know where to begin. You can get help. You can get help. Don't buy that lie. And the encouragement is in this is what I try and do is not set our family up as the gold standard to say, you ought to be just like us. We have issues that we still work on today, but we have some things that you could benefit from if you would replicate. And if you see something in us that isn't in you, it doesn't mean we're better than you. It means you can draw a line today and you can say, well, I didn't have that, but that's where I want to go. And to me, that's the greatest fruitfulness of influence there can be, is if I set a standard that without pride or arrogance or judgmentalism, a standard that says, I want to be like that. I think that's the best thing that could happen while you're here on earth.
Well, let me say, if you do that, your kids may not love it at the time. Because I remember we go on family vacation every summer and have for long before I was born, over 50 years.
Yeah, between 45 and 50.
And it's mom's whole side of her family. She's the oldest of 5, and it started when you two were married. Mm-hmm. And then as everybody got married and had kids and everything, we all get together.
Yep.
And the trip used to be a lot longer. It was about 10 days. Now it's about 7. But it used to be that every night was family night. And Dad would play the guitar and, sing songs, and then the kids would kind of disperse and the adults would stay and catch up, on what's been going on. And I didn't love it. I'm just going to be real honest. The adults loved it. I was always like, all right, can we wrap this up? I got socializing to do. And I wanted to go with my boyfriend out. And
who happened to be at the resort, whose parents owned the resort.
Yeah. And Dad always made me stay for family time. And it was such a beating at the time. Now I look back and I appreciate it. But at the time I was like, come on, can we just get this over with? And it probably just felt this way to me, but it felt like at the time, family night lasted for 5 hours. It was like,
see, what you didn't know is your curfew was 11 o'clock. And if we could extend family time until 10:30, all the better.
Oh, can't go out now. But you weren't compromising on that. It was like, this is important to us. This is what you're going to do. You're going to stick with it. How do you do that? Because sometimes, I'll be honest, my kids, they ask so many times, it beats me down, and I'm just like, fine. And I feel like probably take that a step further to an organization. People ask and they push for so much, and you have that one person, just like you have that one kid that this is going to be a whole ordeal to ask you to do this thing. So I'm just not even going to ask. I'll just do it. Or, whatever. How do you how do you see enough significance in the value to like, no, I'm going to make this thing happen no matter how much you beat me down?
So I actually learned, this is a biblical concept that I learned when I was growing up, even though it wasn't tied to the Bible. The Bible says it this way: train up a child in the way that they should go, and when they're old, they won't depart from it. Well, growing up, we always had a family meal. We always sat down at night to family dinner. And at dinner, my mom was sort of the old school, homemaker. We had a protein, we had a vegetable, we had a starch, and a dessert. I hated vegetables. She would fix the lima beans and Brussels sprouts and cauliflower, and I mean, it's like, oh, and the rule was you're going to help yourself or I'm going to help you. And whatever you help yourself to, you're going to finish, and you're not going to leave the table until it's all gone. And so I fought every night. I don't have to. Oh, I hate green beans, Mom. No, can I have corn? No, we didn't. I don't have corn tonight.
Even from Nebraska, you got corn coming out your ears. You can't have corn for dinner.
Yeah,
how rude.
In other words, she would expose us beyond what our likes were. Mm-hmm. So it's like, oh, I know you don't like Brussels sprouts, or you don't like broccoli. But you do like corn. Okay, I'll fix corn. And so you get as much corn every night as you want. No, she made us eat things that we didn't like and complained about. But you know what I like today?
Yeah, I know. You like Brussels sprouts. You like beets.
I love about every kind of vegetable, because part of that, the train up a child verse, it really means touch the palate of a child when they're young. Mm-hmm. And when they're old, they won't depart from it. So the hard work of parenting is to consistently apply. Mm-hmm. When they go, oh, yuck. I'm sure there were nights at the dinner table when my mom said, it's been a hard day, and I don't want to fight you in this. So, okay, you can be done. You don't have to eat your vegetables. That I remember, now maybe she did, but that I remember, never. And never did she let it up.
So we need to have her on here to talk about parenting.
At 94, if she could remember.
Exactly.
But it's the consistent application is what pays benefit. So I used to tell parents in this, you know how you get your kids to love the church? First of all, to live it yourself, and then consistently apply church involvement to their life. Let them see it in your life, and consistently apply it to their life when they're young. So without exception, each one of you kids at some point in your teen years that would say, I don't want to go to church. I don't want, our youth group is boring. There's none of my friends go. And my response was,
if you don't like it, change it.
Yep. I'll go with you and meet with youth pastor if you want, and we'll figure out what the problem is. No, I don't want to do that. Well, then you better get on the phone and invite a few of your friends, because you're going to youth. And
that has been such a great life lesson for me, because I have noticed that usually the people that complain about places, whether it's church, an organization, school, are usually the least involved people.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if you would get involved, you would see there was actually thought behind that decision that was made. They actually took a lot of things into consideration. But so many people just want to complain about the outcome, but they have no idea what went into actually making the decision. That I'm like, get involved. Yeah. And that was what y'all always said.
And if you take that thought to the core, you're either an influence or you're being influenced. So you don't like it? Let's be an influence to change it. Your friends don't come? Let's be an influence, and you get them to come. You can make this. If the issue is, I want my friends to be here with me, invite them. You know, lean on your friends to come and be a part. You influence their life in this. So that's the principle, and the difficulty as parents is to consistently apply that principle. Now, I have to say, if your mom were on this podcast with us, I'm probably the more legalistic in enforcement of that.
What?
Yeah.
No.
Well, yeah, I know that's shocking to you. So I needed balance at times. You know, when you'd say, I got a big test tomorrow, this is Wednesday, do I have to go to church tonight? My response would be, did you know about the test earlier this week? Yeah. Did you study earlier? No. You're going to youth. And Mom would come in and say, Tom, there was volleyball practice on Monday. There was such and such on Tuesday. They didn't have a chance. They need to stay home tonight. Okay. But see, this is another one of my statements. It's a slippery slope. So,
everything is a slippery slope to you.
Well, so my thought was, if I say this week, okay, you don't have to go this week. Next week there'll be a new excuse and a new. So the slippery slope is, I'm just going to set the value and say no, we're not changing this. This is what we're going to do. And in my view, it goes back to, I'm going to train you when you're young. And let me say this. Sometimes I know parents don't make a commitment to Christ or understand anything about the Bible until their kids are mostly grown. It's more difficult to train them at that age because you haven't influenced them. If you start when they're young, my mom was consistent when I was young. So when I got into my high school years, she didn't have to say, you're not leaving the table until you finish your vegetables. I finished my vegetables and actually liked them.
I can't imagine that, but you go. So have there ever been any of your values that you've adapted or changed? Where one thing that I think Todd has been the one that said it, but, with new information, I get the chance to change my mind.
Yeah.
Probably says it more eloquently, but,
Yeah. I would say the core values. So, when I started talking to you kids about, here are the values, here's the 5 purpose statements for which I've lived my life. They're broad enough that I've not changed them. Now, the application underneath those things, yeah. There's certain things that so my number one, I'm going to live my life to be the greatest influence for God and his kingdom I can live. Well, 30 years ago, what I thought was a message that would compromise my value. It doesn't relate the same, and so things like that have changed, but that core value has not.
Yeah, you're pretty consistent. So when we were growing up, you were a pastor my whole life, but we didn't go to church because you were a pastor.
No.
We went to church because it was a value of ours. And you have 4 kids, and all 4 of us love the church, all have good relationships with the Lord. And, I think you can transfer the same principle into a working parent as well, that works in corporate America and is a workaholic and is constantly at their job. Their kid ends up hating that job because that's what takes the attention of their parent that should be given to them as a kid's perspective. What do you think it was that you guys did? Because I never felt this competition with your job. Yes, your job was a pastor, which I actually think it's hard for pastors to shut off because everything is good. Everything needs attention, But same with the business world too. If I'm not working, if I'm not constantly available, something can fall through the cracks, something could happen. I could lose this deal, whatever it is. How do you find that balance between making it where your kids, even if you are still trying to work while you're at home, how do you make it where your kids feel valued and like the priority, and they don't feel competition with
Yeah.
your job?
I feel that my major responsibility as a parent is to reflect the nature and character of God to my kids, not just to teach them. So we didn't really have a family devotional, kind of thing. I'd put you to bed and we'd sing songs and you'd run up and down the hall and jump on the beds, and as long as you sang, we were good. And then pray and you'd go to bed. Well, so part of the process of that. I just lost the question. Well,
How did you make it where we weren't in competition with your?
yeah. So you'd run up and down the hall, and stuff like that. What I tried to do is make family, to make it clear, family's the priority, and as the dad, I will always be available to you. So I don't care what I'm doing. I don't care where I'm at. If you want me, all you got to do is call. So I would tell my assistant, here's who I'm interruptible for. I'm interruptible for the pastor that I'm connected with, my boss. I'm accountable or open to my wife. If any of these people call, I don't care what I'm doing. You come get me. You interrupt a meeting. Any one of my kids, if they call, I'm available to them. And part of the reason that I did that is because I wanted you to know that God will always be available to you. He's never too busy. If you think, well, God's running the universe. He's, how does he have time for me? He knows so much about you. He has the number of hairs on your head totaled. And so he's never out of touch. He's never, that's the way I felt about it. And so I was always available. Now, there might have been times when, as you grew older, when I told my assistant, it's okay to ask them, tell them, I'm in such and such a meeting, but do you need him? Because if so, I'll interrupt the meeting. I'll go get. And you'd say, no, just have him call me when he gets out. That kind of thing. Well, I think that again, I didn't do this perfectly, but my goal was to represent the availability of God the Father to us in that process. And then I never told you, to my knowledge, I never intended ever to do this, to say, no, you can't do that because I'm clergy. I'm a pastor. I did say at times, no, we're not going to do that because we're Christ followers, we're believers, and believers don't do that. And so I never used my vocation as justification to prevent a connection with us. So you didn't hate my job because I didn't make the job more important than you. Mm-hmm. And truly, my commitment would have been, it was to my marriage first, but to you kids second. And my commitment would have been, if I cannot do this, I don't care if it would have been, as a pastor, but if I were in business at the time, my commitment would have been, if I cannot fulfill my responsibilities and the responsibilities of my job and have a quality marriage, have kids who love me and love God, and a doable life, not a life that was straight. If I can't do it from this job responsibilities, I'm going to find something else. Because these things, a relationship with God, a relationship with my wife, kids who love God and love us, are more important than the job. And I think oftentimes career, people can be men and women now. They prioritize their career and everything else becomes second nature. And they think, I'm doing this to provide you with stuff, a lifestyle. And kids don't. Ultimately, they may ask you for a ton of stuff, but they'd rather have you than the stuff they're asking for.
Yeah. So along that same line, how do you think that people's free will plays into it? Because one of the things that you say is, kids that love you, love God, and that's great. And I mean, we've seen it all the time where you have kids who are all raised by the same parent, but one has this amazing, solid relationship with the Lord, and one, just struggles. And sometimes they end up, it's a short season that they struggle and they come back. And then sometimes it's not, So how does that factor into how you think about parenting and different things like that?
Yeah, I think that God has created us with an appetite for Him. We call an appetite for purpose, but He's the one. In our mother's womb, he sort of determined what the purpose of. I know the plans. That's what Jeremiah says. I know the plans that I have for you, plans for good, not for evil. God had a plan in your mother's womb, and there's a hunger in us to try and figure what that is. And so there's a part of the connective process to that piece that says part of my responsibility as your dad is to help you discover what your purpose is, and as I do that, if you are in search of that, I'm going to invest. I'm going to invest everything I can, every bit of resource that I have, time, money, everything I will do to help you find and fulfill God's purpose for your life. If you choose, so as you get older now, the choices are yours, and if you choose to go another way, I won't support to the degree. I still going to love you, still going to be your dad, but I will not support you to the degree that I would if you were in pursuit of this. And again, I think that reflects how God responds to us. He's always going to love us. My dad told me this one time. He said, I love you and I will always love you. There's nothing that you will ever do that will change that. But you could do some things that will change my proximity. And I remember, I don't know if he said it every time, but one time he said, yeah, if you rob a bank, I'm going to go visit you in prison. It's your choice.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, I don't want you to do this, and I will love you regardless. But if you make bad choices, you're going to pay a consequence for those bad choices, and I can't do anything about it. And so part of, I think that God, in His infinite love, that's the way He responds to us. I love you, and I don't want you to do this, but I'm not taking away your free will. So if you choose not to, I will love you, but there's consequences to the choice that you make.
That's good. Can I ask one last question before we wrap this up?
Yep.
Because as long as I've known you, you're pretty perfect.
No.
You are. You can say no, but you are. And I would love to know. I hear these funny stories about, you got in a fight in high school and got kicked out for like a day. But what would you say across your life was your biggest regret, maybe, or like your biggest learning moment that you think has impacted you the most now?
Well, so, I'm 71, And today, I'm still reflecting back on memories that I had, things that I did that I find had an impact on who I am, both positive and negative. But I thank you. I'm happy that you see me through such rose-colored glasses. But I know there are things responses that I made that have impacted me that I'm taking ownership of today, so that I can continue to grow and walk in freedom. And I could give you recent examples, but if I go all the way back, one that I've been addressing, when I was in fifth grade, the fifth graders played the sixth graders keep away at recess. And I was about as tall as I am right now in fifth grade.
Whoa.
Yeah. So I was the biggest kid in our fifth grade class. So I was the hero. I was the Goliath against the sixth graders.
I need some corroborating evidence or somebody to fact check this story. But go ahead.
It's true. So if we were getting close to the end of recess and the fifth graders had the ball, it was coming to me, and I was responsible to make sure the sixth graders did not get it before the recess was over. And so one day we were doing it. I had the ball. Recess was about to be done, and I was surrounded by sixth graders picking at me, trying to pull the ball away, and I was fearful that I was going to lose it. And so I started writhing, as loud as I could. So I drew the attention of the recess attendant, and in the process of that, I started crying.
Oh.
And so the recess attendant, came over. What's going on? It says stop, right? Stop. And the bell rang. But the sixth graders from that point on called me crybaby.
Kids are so mean.
And hey, crybaby, you gonna play keep away today? Hey, and I made a choice in fifth grade. No one will ever call me a crybaby again. That locked something down in me that I've spent the rest of my life trying to unlock, to get in touch with. And there are other things that added into it. Real men don't cry. Mm-hmm. But they don't. That only reinforced the thing that I said before. Mm-hmm. And so there's things like that happen in our life, and we go, no, how you doing? I'm fine. Well, your mom said to me when my dad died. So I was 37 when my dad died. Wow. I was 37, and I didn't cry.
He was 64, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was close to my dad, loved my dad. He was as good a dad as any that I know of, but I didn't cry. And your mom said to me, why? I'm 37 years old. Something doesn't compute, Tom. As close as you were to your dad, and he died out of time, Why? Why didn't you cry? I couldn't answer that. I don't know. And she said, well, why don't you dig in there and see if you can figure it out? No,
I'm fine.
I don't want to. But knowing what I know today, I would say, because nobody's going to call me a crybaby again.
Isn't it interesting how something that may have seemed insignificant to somebody else Because that's how trauma works. It affects each one of us so uniquely.
Yep.
And half the time we spend our life so impacted by this event, we don't even know really impacted us.
Yeah.
Until we have either someone identifies it like mom did and says, hey, that's not a normal response. Or something happens bad enough that we're like, why did I respond that way? And we start to unpack it. But it's just so interesting to me how nuanced and specific to each one of us it is.
Figure it out, 37 to 71. And, I had plenty of opportunities to get in touch with that and break that response in me to unlock the emotions. Because when you don't cry, it affects many other areas of your life. And so I look back and go, I think I could have been way more compassionate, way more, expressive in the things that I did if I would have gotten in touch with this a lot sooner.
But I also love one thing that you're saying right now is one thing that I remember Grandpa, Mom's dad, telling me. I'd go visit him and he would be, 80, and he would be like, man, this morning the Lord showed me this thing. It was so cool. And I'm like, at 80? And even like hearing you say that, on one hand, I'm like, that's amazing that you're learning something and unlocking something at 71. You're still growing and learning. And also it's so defeating. I'm like, I'm not going to be perfect even at 71. This is so defeating.
Don't take it as defeat, because it's really not. But it is a challenge to say, no matter what your age, you can continue to grow.
That's so true.
And God is so invested in our well-being. If you think of life on earth, the number of years, whatever they are, and say, this isn't the end. There's a transition coming, and a transition into an eternal life that has no end. And you're essentially, there's God's going to make some changes, give you a new name, and there's going to be some cool things that are going to happen in eternity, but it isn't over. So keep growing. Don't quit. That's right. Don't coast to the finish line. That's one of the things I say. My ideal end of my life would be for me to be passionately pursuing God and ministering for Him, representing Him in whatever capacity He allows me. And I say, you know what? I think I'm going to take a nap. I'll see you when I wake up, and I wake up in His presence, having transitioned. Now, that would be my perfect see ya.
Well, let's not talk about that, because that's not happening anytime soon. Dad, thank you for letting me ask you the questions and take Todd's spot today.
Well, thank you.
And be between no lanes.
But between the
Us
father-daughter lane.
That's right.
In our life. Yeah. I just want to say thank you for joining us on this episode of Between the Lanes. Hopefully you received something as my daughter and I shared in this podcast. And I want to say to you, as we've been saying to others, if you like what we're doing, our podcast is brought to you by the Executive Leadership Institute. And if you like what we're doing, if you just simply hit the button below, subscribe, become a part of our community in this. We'd love to know that you are being impacted by what we're doing. So just take a minute and do that if you would. And Lindsay, I'm going to ask you to do something as we end. Will you pray for the folks over today's podcast?
I will. Lord, I thank you so much for just what you're doing in each leader's life. I pray that every person that's watching or listening to this would be impacted today, that they would grow in their walk with you and gain a new tool that could help them in some way. I thank you for my dad and for the impact he's made on so many lives, but especially mine. And I pray that you would just I honor him today and the walk that he's chosen to walk with you and to lead so many other leaders on this journey. And so I just pray today that he would be blessed and just bless our community. Be with us today. Bless every home represented listening to this. And we glorify you and we give you all the praise in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. God bless you.
Bye.